I've just watched the Joseph Parker-Jason Bergman fight. Now, somebody on Twitter posted a link and they were streaming it on Periscope. So I watched it live. I've got to admit, I watched it on my iPhone. The picture quality wasn't the greatest. So even though I've seen the fight, it was one of those where you probably didn't see every detail in high definition. Certainly not if you're watching the stream that I was watching. Joseph Parker won the fight by stoppage in the 8th round, essentially just wearing his opponent down. His opponent had little to offer after the first few rounds, and this fight really became target practice and almost like a glorified sparring session for Joseph Parker, with one or two differences which I'll come on to in a minute. But Parker had his opponent down in round 2 with a big hook. At that point, I expected the fight would get stopped, or I expected Parker would finish the opponent, Bergman, but Bergman hung in there and fought on valiantly for several rounds. He was dropped again in the 7th, dropped again in the 8th, and the referee waved him off in the 8th. And to be honest, I think the referee could have waved this fight off earlier. You know, Bergman was not competitive whatsoever in there. He was regularly trying to take a knee. He was doing this tactic of trying to get low and almost rugby tackling Joseph Parker to buy himself an extra 15-20 seconds. And his experience and his, the fact that he's had so many more fights as a journeyman than Joseph Parker probably showed through and allowed him to stay on late into this fight and hang in there. It was an impressive win in places from Joseph Parker. However, there were things to be worked on in this fight. In the first round, Parker comes out and he's trying to close the ring down on his opponent. And I thought he did quite a good job with his footwork of positioning his opponent in the corner and closing down the angles. What he did do, however, to me, is when he got the opponent in the corner, is he would rely too much on a single punch. You know, for me, what I would like to see Parker doing in that situation is throwing the double jab and then dropping to the body. And he did do that at various points throughout the fight, but early on he was possibly a bit more reliant on single shots, and this is something that his corner kind of flagged to him and said that he needed to be utilising that double jab more. And when he was doing it, it was effective. I mean, early on when Bergman was still lively, Parker was doing a good job with his feet of positioning him in a corner, but sometimes Bergman, being an experienced southpaw, was kind of able to duck under a Parker punch and almost wheel away from him and create a bit more space. Bergman was also looking for that big left-hand big left-hand counter. He was trying to lure Parker in, and when Parker threw, he'd kind of lean back and throw the straight left. And he did catch Parker. As I say, because I was watching this on a mobile phone screen, it was not always easy to tell exactly what accuracy the guy had. But, you know, there was at least 2 or 3 occasions in this fight, both in the first round and also in the last round or 2, where Bergman was able to land a big counterpunch on Parker. And whilst I didn't think this fight was going to be a test for Parker, it ended up being a test. And Parker, in many ways, I felt, was less comfortable in there against the southpaw. I mean, I thought Bergman would be too low level to cause Parker problems, even though Bergman fought out of a southpaw stance. But I think this is an occasion where Bergman's probably been a guy who hasn't been very dedicated to the sport, who's been taking, you know, late notice fights, and he's tried to get himself into some sort of conditioning and some sort of nick for this fight, and he's put in a good performance, and credit needs to go for Bergman in this fight. He surpassed my expectations. In fact, he surpassed a lot of people's expectations, and he went 8 rounds, which I believe is the longest he's ever gone in his career, and he showed huge heart, huge grit, huge determination. But essentially, whilst Parker showed a few things that need to be improved on, Parker was just a class above, you know. Bergman was offering very, very little resistance in the middle rounds of this fight, and Parker's hand speed, Parker's power clearly gave him a massive, massive edge, you know. When he was flurrying on Bergman, you kind of got the sense that the fight could end at any moment. It's just with Bergman's sort of experience, with him getting low, with his stance, I think Parker was finding it difficult to finish and to pull the trigger and to really get Bergman out of there. For me, it's a learning curve for Parker, it's experience for Parker. You know, there's been a lot of press in the lead up to this fight that Joseph Parker had maybe overboiled in training, that he was a bit lethargic, a bit slow in training, and that he needed a little bit of a break really before stepping back into the ring again, because he's been in back-to-back camps and back-to-back fights, and maybe there is some truth on that. You know, all in all, could he have made this fight look a bit more easy than he did? Very possibly. You know, could he have closed the show in round 2? Very possibly. It wasn't the best performance of Parker's career. You know, things to work on. The double jab, you know, he's got such a good, fast, snappy double jab. It's really, really key for him to be implementing it. And I think throwing single shots also makes it very easy to get counterpunched, as we saw in this fight against Bergman. You know, if you throw a jab, Bergman's able to sort of ride it and throw one back. But if you double up the jab, the second Bergman's rid the first punch, there's a second one coming back his way, and he can't concentrate on, you know, throwing a big counterpunch. So for me, that double jab is actually key to Parker. He needs to focus on keeping his hands in front of his chin. You know, Bergman clearly didn't have enough power to hurt him, but this is heavyweight boxing, and it's never been good to be tagged like that. You know, in terms of should he have finished it round 2, there's an argument on both sides. I don't think the rounds will do Parker any harm at all. He's probably learnt more from this fight and the struggles he encountered with a tricky, experienced southpaw than he would have earned in another one-round blowout. So I don't criticise him for that. You know, potentially a 2 or 3 month break before our next fight would do him some good, let him rest up. Bergman, tough, experienced, awkward, but a class below. Parker, his hand speed, his power, did the trick in the end. You know, that's really my thoughts to sum up this fight. Look forward to seeing Parker next time out. I'd like to see him step up in levels slightly more. Even though Bergman was tough, he really had nothing to bother Joseph Parker with. And I'd kind of like to see Parker have 2 or 3 months off and then come back and face a top 20, top 30 level opponent. I think it's time now to bridge that gap. And I think these continual low-level opponents probably aren't doing the best of motivating the young guy. Let me know your thoughts. Many thanks indeed for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, do give me the thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel.